General Holder, it's great to be with you again here in Washington, where Congress is back in session. Impeachment in the air, impeachment talk. I want to draw on your expertise. You came to this town 43 years ago, and you worked in the Public Integrity Unit of the Justice Department. Do you believe there are grounds for impeachment, for Congress to proceed with impeachment?
Well, I don't think there's any doubt about that. If you look at just the Mueller report, there are grounds there for impeachment. There were 10 specifications of possible obstruction of justice. I think that at least 4 of those are pretty solid. You know, the attempt to get McGahn to do certain things, to get Sessions to take over the investigation. Well, I think there's clearly a basis for impeachment on the basis of Mueller. And then in addition, the emoluments clause. I don't think there's any question that there's a basis for an impeachment inquiry, an impeachment investigation.
Well, let me ask you about Mueller and his decision not to draw any conclusion as to whether the president committed obstruction of justice. He cited Justice Department rules, that those were in place when you were Attorney General. Did you agree with his approach to this?
It was interesting. I actually thought that what Bob Mueller said was fair. He thought that because he could not indict the president, the president would not have an ability then to respond to a charge that he might make. I was really kind of perplexed then to see the Attorney General say, no, in fact, if Mueller wanted to say that the president could have been indicted, he should have said so. So I think that Bob conducted himself in an appropriate way, bar. And
what about that? What about, you read, now you've read the report. Yeah. Going back to his distillation of the report, he summarized it for the country many weeks before anyone got to see the report.
Evidence developed by the special counsel is not sufficient to establish that the president committed an obstruction of justice offense.
Was that a fair summary?
No. I mean, what Barr did in the 2 public interactions he had with regard to the Mueller report was totally untruthful. He said things about the report that were totally inconsistent with the things that were contained in the report. And it was really kind of puzzling to me. It was almost like as if, well, we're going to get the report. We're going to be able to read this and compare what you've said to what's in the report. And
was he trying to buy time, or what do you think was his motive?
I'm not sure what his motive was, but I think the impact of having the Attorney General of the United States dissemble, say something inconsistent with what we had an opportunity to examine, did a great deal to harm him and to harm the Justice Department.
Do you think Congress should proceed? That's a different matter than whether they could, whether they have an inquiry. Is impeachment a wise thing to do at this point, and would they be shirking their responsibilities if they didn't proceed?
Yeah, I think that they should proceed with an impeachment inquiry, an impeachment investigation. That doesn't necessarily commit you to actually impeaching the president. I think that's what people have to understand. I think you could go through a whole proceeding and then make a determination that you're not going to impeach him. You're perhaps going to censure him. There's going to be a sense of the House of Representatives, and in that sense of the House of Representatives, lay out all the things that you have found during the inquiry, and not send it to the Senate, where I think the Republicans are likely to acquit him, deny him that, but actually lay out for the American people, put witnesses in front of the American people. I want to see Don McGahn testify. I want to see Sessions testify.
Do you think he will, by the way? I mean, every administration has its differences with Congress over executive privilege. Your administration and the one that I served in did as well. But they've taken a very tough line on this issue of executive privilege. Do you think that ultimately the courts will compel these people to testify?
Yes. I don't think that the executive privilege that might have existed still is in existence.
Oh, I see.
The fact that McGahn actually spoke to Bob Mueller waives the privilege that might have otherwise existed, and I think as a result, we'll have to go through a court process, but I think ultimately he and others will have to testify.
If there is no impeachment, do you believe that he is subject to prosecution after he leaves office?
Well, I don't think there's any question about that. We already have an indictment in the Southern District of New York where Michael
Relative to the payoff.
Relative to the payoffs, that Michael Cohen is already in jail with regard to his role there. Individual one is the president, and it would seem to me that the next attorney general, the next president, is going to have to make a determination.
That's an interesting question. You came here in the post-Watergate period. President Ford made a decision to pardon President Nixon because he thought it would be bad for the country to go through a trial of a former president. Would there be a cost to that?
Yeah, I think there is a potential cost to the nation by putting on trial a former president, and that ought to at least be a part of the calculus that goes into the determination that has to be made by the next attorney general. I think we should understand what a trial of a former president would do to the nation. I think that shaped the determination that Gerald Ford made with regard to Nixon.
It may have cost him his election in 1976.
Yeah, it might have, but I think looking back, I tend to think that was probably the right thing to do.
Barr was cited for contempt of Congress. You were the first attorney general to be cited for contempt of Congress in the Fast and Furious investigation. What's different about the scale and scope of what this administration is doing and how it is relating to the Congress?
Yeah, I was found in contempt with regard to Fast and Furious, and we made witnesses available. We shared about 8,000 pages of documents, but that wasn't...
So there was a lot of back and forth in the courts about additional material, and it took years to sort that out.
Right, and what we did, or what I did, was, as a matter of principle, say you're not going to get access to deliberative materials within the Justice Department. Now, all of these documents have now been given to Congress. Sessions decided when he became Attorney General to turn all this stuff over. There's been nothing in there. You only find that I did what I said. I held back stuff that was deliberative in nature. This administration has taken a fundamentally different view, which is to say that we're not going to respond at all to anything that Congress asks us about. And the contempt, it seems to me, that they held Barr in is far more justified than what happened to me in Fast and Furious.
The issue of the Justice Department itself, I know that you spent most of your life there. I remember you and I having a bit of a scrap in the White House because I wanted to...
Small scraps.
A small scrap, yes, but recommend a communications person.
Right.
And you felt this was an affront to your independence as the Attorney General. Mm-hmm. What do you see in the relationship between the White House and the Justice Department now?
It's too close. There has to be a wall between the Justice Department and the White House. Now, the question is how tall that wall needs to be, but there are certain things that an Attorney General has to have the independence to do, free from White House interaction. I remember when I was being considered and I was up for confirmation, I think Pat Leahy said something, Senator Pat Leahy said something I always kept in my mind, that I had to be the Attorney General of the United States. I was not the Secretary of Justice. The Attorney General is different from all other cabinet members. The Justice Department gets into trouble when it allies itself too closely with the White House. History has shown us that. The
president has said that he's made it clear he thought the Attorney General should be his lawyer. And do you think Barr is playing that role?
Yeah, the president's statements were very troubling, and it's more troubling now that Barr seems to think that, in fact, that is his role as Attorney General, to represent the president as opposed to representing the people of the United States.
You work with Mueller, I mentioned that. Mm-hmm. You also work with Jim Comey as FBI director. They're very different. Yeah. Personalities. Mueller, kind of a ramrod straight by the book guy. Comey is a bit more of a maverick. And we just saw a report from the IG, the Inspector General at the Justice Department, that was a pretty strong rebuke of Comey for leaking materials, sensitive materials, not classified materials, to try and nudge the appointment of a special prosecutor. What was your reaction to that and his overall role over the last few years in the 2016 campaign?
Yeah, I think first off that the baseline for me is that Jim Comey is a man of integrity. I disagreed with him with what he did during the course of the election. The press conference that he had saying that he was not going to recommend indicting Hillary Clinton, I think that was something an FBI director doesn't do. That was something that the Justice Department, the Attorney General, should have held that press conference. But I understand also what he did with regard to that material that he got out there. I think his concern was that unless he did that, the information would not be treated in an appropriate way. And in fact, we saw that the release of that material did result in the appointment of an independent counsel. So I think that he was technically wrong, and again, the IG made an appropriate determination. But I understand why Jim did what he did.
My impression is that he is someone who, at times, arrogates to himself authorities that he doesn't have. The Hillary Clinton press conference was an example of that. And the second wave in 2016, when he revealed that he had found some emails and then at the very end said they didn't amount to anything, a lot of people think that that had a material impact on the election. That seems completely contrary to not just the role of the FBI director, but the role of the Justice Department, which generally stays out of campaigns.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in the public integrity section, as you mentioned. The Justice Department is only supposed to speak when it indicts. You don't talk about somebody who you could have indicted, what you might have done. If you're not going to bring a charge, you just are quiet about it. And I think that was the biggest concern, the biggest problem I had with how Jim conducted himself back in 2016. And I wrote an article about that was hard for me to write, because I've known Jim for 20 years or so. I like him, I respect him. But I thought, as I said in that article, sometimes good men make mistakes. And I thought he made a mistake in 2016.
The president's really waged a full-scale kind of assault on the integrity of the FBI, on the Justice Department, suggesting deep state political and so on. What is the impact on that institution of all of his rhetorical thrusts?
Well, first, we got to be real clear here. There's no basis for the things that Donald Trump has said about the Justice Department and the FBI. Those are career folks who dedicate themselves to finding the truth, bringing charges when that's appropriate, who do it at great risk to themselves. And the impact of that is certainly on the morale of the Justice Department, but there's a long-term impact as well, where the Justice Department, the FBI are seen as potentially politicized. There are going to be credibility determinations the juries are going to have to make between what an FBI agent says and what a defendant says. And having this president say that, well, that FBI agent is a political person in nature could have an impact at even the trial level. So it's totally unjustified, and long-term, I think, is very harmful. It is something that really, really, if I can say it, pisses me off. That really, really pisses me off, because I know these people. I worked with these people. I was one of those people. And to see a president of the United States go after the Justice Department, the FBI, the intelligence community in the way that he has is totally inconsistent with what a president ought to do.